Good morning. Good morning. Thank you. I've done enough events with pastors where if you don't say it all in unison, they say it again and again. But I'm not going to say good morning again because everybody's paying attention. Thank you for being here in person and virtually. I am thrilled to welcome you all to the National Housing Conference's Solutions for Affordable Housing. This event would not be possible but for the generous support of our sponsors. So thank you to our premier sponsors, Bank of America, JP Morgan Chase, and Wells Fargo. Our select sponsor, Rocket Companies. Our networking reception sponsor, Navy Federal Credit Union, a new member of NHC. Our lunch sponsor, the National Multifamily Housing Council. Our friend sponsors, AARP, Freddie Mac, and Pretium. And our panel sponsors, Airbnb, CoreLogic, the Council of Federal Home Loan Banks, Enterprise Community Partners, and NeighborWorks America. I also want to thank Airbnb for finding me a great place in Park City. And our supporting sponsor, the National Association of Realtors. A few housekeeping notes before we start. One is be sure to take advantage of the attendee hub, which is how you're submitting questions throughout the day to the panelists. It also has a great list of all of the people who are here and their organizations, and so check that out. Just so you know, you can sort it by organization or first name or last name. You can conveniently access the site through the QR code on your tables and on the agenda. It'll allow you to ask questions of the panels, explore information about speakers, and more. I also want to encourage you, if you are not currently a member, to join the National Housing Conference. There has never been a better time to join NHC. We really are the place where all kinds of different housers come to get things done. And I want to also put in a plug for the position we have listed for a senior housing policy advisor or director. And if you are interested in being a part of what we're doing, I would love to have you submit your resume because we're going to have a hell of a year. For those deeply engaged in the realm of housing, this event is not just an opportunity, it's a necessity. The urgency to place housing at the forefront of the political dialogue has never been more crucial, given the persistent affordability crisis affecting communities nationwide. And I want to point you on nhc.org to our Paycheck to Paycheck database, where you can search any occupation in any metropolitan area or any group of them, compare them year over year on how that occupation can afford or not afford either any number of rental units or buying a home at 3 or 10% down. According to Paycheck, 28% of 190 occupations cannot afford to rent a studio apartment. And this is not just about the coast. In Boise, Idaho, only 3 of 127 tract occupations can afford to buy a median-priced home with 3% down. In just over a month from now, we're going to inaugurate a new president and an old president, Donald J. Trump, who will be the 47th and 45th president of the United States, as well as a Republican-led Congress. President Trump was elected with a clear majority with the intention to bring change to Washington, and I'm pretty sure we can count on that. For NHC, little has changed. We will continue to serve as a diverse continuum of affordable housing stakeholders that convene and collaborate through dialogue, advocacy, research, and education to develop equitable solutions that serve our common interest in America, where everyone is able to live in a quality, affordable home in a thriving community. And if that sounds familiar, it's because we wrote that in 1949 as part of the 1949 Housing Act. NHC will focus our energies on working with the Trump administration where we agree and oppose policies where we believe they are counterproductive to our mission. Our highest priorities over the first 100 days of the new administration will remain the enactment of 2 housing supply bills that have strong bipartisan support, the Affordable Housing Credit Improvement Act and the Neighborhood Homes Investment Act. With the likelihood of a budget reconciliation being approved early in 2025, both of these long sought-after bills stand a good chance of passing if we work together. So what does that mean? It means that housing is not a zero-sum game, and housing is not a pay-for housing. If we fall into that trap, we will get nothing. So today's conference is designed with a focus on actions that are tangible, impactful, and achievable. And at the heart of that is our ability to work together and help each other and leverage each other to get those things done. Today's sessions are tailored to provide participants with valuable insights, enhancing your understanding of how your organization's objectives align with a broader national housing strategy. Engaging discussions with housing industry leaders will touch upon timely topics, such as the impact of the elections on a 2025 housing agenda, the housing insurance crisis, preserving generational wealth, the effects of rent regulation on renters and landlords, modernizing federal housing programs, addressing homelessness as a health issue, and the challenge of missing middle housing, and more. I am thrilled to have 2 distinguished keynote speakers today who have spearheaded significant advances in housing policy. Senator Mark Warner, who I was just speaking with, and Congresswoman Debbie Dingell. Shortly, we'll be joined by Senator Warner, who will share his insights on current congressional initiatives and bipartisan strategies that can be implemented to tackle the pressing housing challenges of our time. After lunch, Congresswoman Dingell will join us to continue this important conversation, offering her perspective on the legislative efforts underway to create sustainable long-term solutions for affordable housing. And both leaders have been at the forefront of bipartisan collaboration, recognizing the housing crisis knows no political boundaries. Their commitment to working across the aisle underscores the importance of unity in addressing these issues. We look forward to hearing from them about the innovative approaches being considered in Congress, progress being made, and what we as advocates and stakeholders can do to support these efforts and drive meaningful change. The moment for tangible, impactful, and achievable solutions transcends political boundaries and resonates across communities. I hope you leave this conference with the understanding that we must continue to work as a united coalition to ensure that today's pressing housing issues are being addressed at all levels of government. I'll be back shortly to introduce Senator Warner, but I would now like to welcome Keith Bickle, Senior Vice President for Public Policy and Executive for Mortgage Markets at Bank of America, to deliver some brief remarks. In addition to his current role, Keith previously led the bank's affordable housing lending group, where he was responsible for helping drive sustainable home ownership among multicultural and military borrowers, and I've worked with him on those issues for many, many years. So welcome, Keith. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, everyone. I hope that we are warmer in here, certainly, than outside. So let me start with a warm welcome to the 2024 National Housing Conference, the Affordable Housing Summit. It's an honor to be here with you all today, whether you're here in DC or for those of you who are online nationwide, as we gather to address some of the most pressing issues and opportunities in affordable housing. So this year's theme couldn't be more timely. We're at a pivotal moment in our nation's housing landscape across all levels of government, so federal, state, and local. Housing policies are evolving, shaped by the recognition that we need to address both the housing supply in addition to the demand side that we have been stoking for a number of years now. Our collective work here today is about moving beyond rhetoric and developing tangible, impactful, and achievable solutions, right? The underlying tagline theme for this conference that David put up, right, for the housing challenges that we face. So as we embark on the summit today, and we'll delve into a range of critical issues, from shaping a national housing agenda in a new political landscape that David alluded to preserving generational wealth through heirs property, confronting insurance challenges, and other rising costs in our industry. We'll explore the complexities of rent regulation, the urgent need for updates to federal housing programs, still, that are ongoing, and address the homelessness as a health crisis. And critically, we'll tackle one of the most pressing issues in today's housing market, the need for strategies, as David mentioned, to expand housing for the missing middle. So to do this, David today has brought together an incredibly diverse group of stakeholders. So in the room today, we've got municipal leaders, nonprofits, developers, lenders, and charities, all of us united by a shared commitment to addressing the affordable housing crisis. And by working together, we can bridge the gaps that persist between policy, practice, and the people that we aim to serve. Now, at Bank of America, we're proud to be longtime supporters of David, the NHC, and its mission. For more than 2 decades, we've worked alongside many of you to advance affordable housing solutions that help individuals and families build better futures. Through initiatives like our $15 billion community homeownership commitment, we're focused on making homeownership more accessible, particularly for low and moderate income borrowers. In the past few years alone, we've provided nearly $440 million in grants, most of that, 87%, going to first-time home buyers, people just beginning their journey toward home ownership. So whether it's through down payment grants, innovative mortgage options, financial education tools, we're committed, by the way, if you don't know, if you just happen to be with that rare person in the room who doesn't know about our Khan Academy and the great information that we have on there for borrowers, people seeking to get into home ownership for the first time, I highly, highly encourage you to go check that out. We know that home ownership is one piece of the puzzle, but we also have to expand the availability of affordable housing, develop workforce housing, a very critical area, preserve existing affordable housing options, and ensure that housing remains a path to economic mobility. So at B of A, we're committed not just to the demand side, which is where I led a team in the affordable housing segment, but we're also committed on the supply side as well, through a diversity of initiatives that we have underway outside of just our affordable lending segment. So as we move through today's sessions, I encourage each of you to think not only about immediate challenges, but how to achieve sustainability of the solutions. What kind of housing system do we want to see and help create for future generations? How can we work together even more to make our collective vision a reality? So thank you again for being here. We look forward to the rich discussion, insight, and collaboration that will come from this summit. Together, we can create the solutions that will drive meaningful progress in affordable housing and build stronger, more resilient communities across the country. Let's get started.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Keith. It is now my honor to introduce Senator Mark Warner, the senior senator from the Commonwealth of Virginia. Senator Warner serves as chairman of the Select Committee on Intelligence and is a member of the Senate Finance, Banking, Budget, and Rules Committees. During his time in the Senate, Senator Warner has established himself as a bipartisan leader who works across the aisle to accomplish sustainable solutions to America's most important challenges. He's served as a key supporter of several pieces of critical legislation addressing affordable housing shortage, including co-sponsoring the Affordable Housing Credit Improvement Act and the Neighborhood Homes Investment Act, as well as being a longtime leader and advocate for the New Markets Tax Credit. Senator Warner is a strong proponent of the necessity for public-private partnerships in addressing the financial and economic disparities in underserved communities where access to banking relationships and credit is often limited. His idea for a community development investment tax credit aims to address these challenges. Further, his introduction of the LIFT Act will help first-time, first-generation homebuyers, disproportionately Americans of color, accelerate wealth building through homeownership. Prior to coming to Congress, he served as governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia. When he left office in 2006, Virginia was ranked as the best state for business, the best managed state, and the best state in which to receive a public education. Please join me in welcoming Senator Mark Warner. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, David. I appreciate you got one thing right on that introduction. You did call me the senior senator from Virginia, because oftentimes people are now referring to me as the senior citizen from Virginia. So
The Commonwealth of Virginia.
the Commonwealth, that's right. There are 4 Commonwealths, and we're proud to be one.
So next Congress, we're going to have a new cabinet, new majority leader, a new chair of the banking committee, and if the filibuster remains, the GOP will have to find ways to be bipartisan to get anything done outside of reconciliation in the Senate. Mm-hmm. What are some of the housing policies that you're planning on pushing for and staying focused on in the next Congress?
Great. Well, first of all, thank you for having me here. This is a subject matter I'm quite interested in, back to my time as governor, and really applaud the work that you and everybody in this room does. I also think that there is a recognition, a lot of conversation with colleagues on both sides. You know, we went through all the wildness of COVID, put out under both Trump and Biden north of $5 trillion. We did lots in every category other than housing. You know, we maybe did a little rent relief, but there was really that much money out, yet nothing substantive on housing. So I think there was a clear acknowledgement that it's housing's time. And a matter of fact, in Virginia just coming out of an election cycle, I'm up next cycle, but being around, housing, supply, affordability, childcare probably were the things I heard, next to inflation the most. So let me go down the litany. Obviously, LIHTC, and whatever we're calling it this week, needs to be expanded, and it was a disappointment we didn't get it done this time. The Neighborhood Homes Act, which I'm inheriting from my good friend Ben Cardin, I think has huge potential. That ability to put an insurance layer underneath the ability to redevelop existing housing stock in a more meaningful way, very powerful. New markets tax credit, broad bipartisan support. We need to make that permanent and put a distinct revenue source next to it. You were kind enough to mention the LIFT Act. The LIFT Act idea, and you helped me redefine this. We all know, that in many ways the racial wealth gap in this country goes a lot due to the historic discrimination in our housing markets, 10 to 1, black families to white families. The LIFT Act, and I think we came at it pretty creatively, said first generation, first time homebuyers, which, as we've discussed, 60% people of color, if you qualified within certain income bands for a 30-year mortgage, where we provide the subsidy is we give you the 20-year mortgage, even though you paid a rate at a 30-year. In effect, doubling the amount of equity you'd have in a 10-year period. So I think that one, particularly with the new administration, may have some catch. A couple other quick ones, because I know we've got lots of questions to go through. And again, something that you and your team have helped us with. And we all know, and this is an obvious truism, particularly with my Republican colleagues, it's much easier to spend in the tax code
Yes.
than it is to spend in appropriated federal dollars. So as somebody who has led an unsuccessful effort for now decades on recognizing our debt and deficit problems, it is what it is, but spending by whichever name. And one of the areas that I think I've talked to a lot of Republicans about, and every politician says, we want to have our nurses, cops, firefighters, et cetera, be able to live closer to where they work. We have a live here, work here tax incentive that would give a forgivable 5-year loan that would be able to, an employer could give to that nurse if they live in the community that's adjacent. And the hook would be, there's already some of those programs, but could we actually make all or part of that, tax-free to the employee? And because it would be forgiven at 20% a year over a 5-year period, it's a great retention tool and becomes a benefit to the employee, similar to some of the already existing laws that allow you to go to school. So a housing component there. A couple of other quick items. I think we'll get to CDFIs maybe on another question, but an idea that I have been road testing, and I'll admit it is quite thin at the top. So with a lot of folks in this room, you're the expertise, and I've got a great new housing guy back, Nick Larson. He's waving his hand. Please see Nick if you can help us fill out this idea. There is not a community in America, whether it be rural, suburban, or urban, that doesn't have a decaying shopping center. I'm not talking about necessarily the old covered malls, but within decaying shopping centers, they already have infrastructure, they already have parking, some level of a conversion to multifamily use or multiple uses, retail and. Now, obviously, the buildings themselves are pretty worthless, but something, you talk about a thing that gets an immediate response. If you could have a shopping center conversion tax incentive or program, I think we could build a hugely broad coalition around a new idea. Because I do think in housing, we are going to need some. I love all the new market tax credit and LIHTC and the historic tax credit. I've got a bill on that as well. But we need some fresh new ideas to stir the pot.
And there's no magic wand to fixing the housing crisis. Every element of it is important, and certainly the availability of affordable multifamily housing is a huge issue. We have a lot of experts in the room, and I just have to say, somebody who's worked with Senator Warner, when he says they're looking for your advice, he's not kidding. So Nick is in the back. Nick's phone number is probably not a mystery to anybody, 224-3121. Just ask for Nick. And it's
Nick 2. We got two Nicks. There's Nick 1 and Nick 2.
Nick 1 and
Only
Nick 2.
because he came up 2 months after Nick 1.
Right, so ask Nick for Nick 2 in Senator Warner's office, and it will not take long. So let's talk a little bit about the cabinet. You're going to have a bunch of votes coming up on cabinet appointees. It's a pretty broad span of folks who've been nominated.
That was delicately done.
I'm doing my best. And Scott Besson, Scott Turner, going to have a big role in housing in the future. Any thoughts you have on those confirmations and kind of what we should look for in their hearings, and then as we work with them in the first several years of the Trump administration?
I don't know either gentleman. I intend to get to know them obviously quickly, but I do have some history of working with the first Trump administration. Steve Mnuchin and I actually became very good friends. We worked on a lot of the COVID packages together. We became biking buddies, and we stay in good touch. And one of the things that I was proudest of in working with the Trump administration was the fact that we were able to secure in the last COVID package under Trump $12 billion for CDFIs. A small segment of this community probably knows. I have still had to educate a lot of my colleagues what CDFIs are, but in terms of, again, taking that kind of lending ability into underserved communities, it's their definition. I still remember then President Trump talking about his $100 billion initiative that was basically the leverage we had. $3 billion of the CDFI funds went into grants, $9 billion went into Tier 1 capital, and that was going to help minority communities. So I think the place to, you've got to find ways to talk about these programs, and maybe for those of us who fall on the kind of the center left in this audience, in a different way. Yeah. And whether, I've found with my Republican friends, it's always easier to talk about wealth creation, access to capital easier than anti-poverty. Now, end of the day, if you get to the same spot, who cares how we describe it? But I'm very hopeful that I can build on both the Housing and the Treasury Secretary. And I'll tell you, my partner in CDFIs is Mike Crapo, who happens to have a fairly important job going forward as the chairman of the Senate Finance Committee. We've built a bipartisan CDFI caucus in the Senate, 26 senators, equal number of Ds and Rs. We're trying to move forward on a CDFI tax credit so that long-term patient capital could get some reward from that. We're also working very aggressively to see if we could start to create a secondary loan market, if we could securitize some of the CDFI debt and, again, further expand that capacity. CDFI is obviously still a small sector in the overall financial place, but it is a valuable component, and particularly in terms of folks in this room, I think a good partnering source of capital, and I'm sure many of you already have.
And I'll note that I worked for Steve Mnuchin for a year before I came to NHC, had nothing but a good experience.
Yes.
And when he said we need to figure out how to make CRA better, a lot of people in the building were in a panic. Oh my God, he wants to kill CRA. And his instruction to us was, no. Stop trying to guess what you think I want and just tell me how to make it better. Yeah. And his memo to regulators, I think if we had followed that memo, we would have really had a big impact on CRA.
I think he was somebody you could disagree with without, either side kind of going to their corner. But I'm hoping if we could have somebody with either the two gentlemen have half the integrity and thoughtfulness of Stephen, we'll be doing fine.
Great, low bar at half. But 500 will get you into the Hall of Fame pretty much automatically. So Mnuchin came in, one of his top priorities, GSE reform. The job had other ideas. I always say the first three priorities of any Treasury Secretary is don't screw this up. Yeah. And number 4 is, did you read number 1 through 3? Yeah. So we'll put GSE reform at number 5 when he got in. Didn't get to it. Here we are talking about it again. I don't want to dredge up any PTSD for you, but talk to me about GSE reform. What do you see coming?
David, I don't know. I've still got the scars of Corker-Warner or Warner-Corker, depending on which version.
Well, afterwards, I think it was Corker-Warner.
I know, yeah.
If it had passed, it would be Warner-Corker.
Yeah. We had a notion of trying to, split up the enterprise into multiple. I'm not sure years later whether that was the completely the best. I still think that we can keep duty to serve, which is terribly important. But I also think, what we had negotiated in Corker-Warner was, somewhere around 15 to 20 basis points, as something that would be a definable income stream that would go to the Housing Trust Fund, that would go to the goals that we have. And I think that dependable revenue stream, rather than the kind of behind the curtain duty to serve. I think you should maintain the duty to serve policy, but let's have a dependable revenue stream. I do think there are more, even some of my Republican friends, I think may have changed some of their thinking as well to, does the utility model actually make more sense? I have a little bit of PTSD because for a brief, not terribly brief, I guess I had about 2 years when I was on this virtually every day, I actually understood the inner workings of housing finance. I have completely forgotten all of that. And I almost don't want to relearn, but the Corker-Warner mistake looking back was I had presumed because I had then President Obama and more Republican support that we could get it done. We had not thought through enough on the Democratic side and underestimated. Now, there may be a rush again coming from the Republicans. So I just don't know. I do fear at the end of the day, there are so many entrenched in interest. A get them out of conservatorship on one level would be a good goal, but there's a lot of folks who think, the boat's not rocking that much, just leave it be.
And we basically have a functioning utility model right now. So if you like the utility model, there's not a lot of interest in change. I think that, and having worked on it for many years myself, and I think Michael Bright was the one who said that the best thing to come out of Corker Warner was that 3 members of the banking committee could define convexity risk. And, I say that there were really 2.
I used to be one of
You
those, but
don't
no longer,
count
I don't have.
because you already knew. And it's, and certainly as we've learned with SVB, convexity risk is worth knowing about. So it is going to be interesting how we move forward there. And I think most people forget that we actually did GSE reform in HERA, and it has served us well. So working off of that model may be the answer for us. Let's talk about the Department of Government Efficiency, which is called DOGE. And I just want to note for those amateur historians of the audience that in the early Middle Ages, the Doge of Venice was responsible for running both the political world and the oligarchy. So interesting irony
I'll leave
there.
you with those comments there.
And just talking about history.
Yeah.
So Elon Musk, Vivek Ramaswamy, what should we look for there, and what are you looking for or not?
There are lots of places in government where huge new technology efficiency is long overdue. How you do it in
Said
a
the
way,
guy who ran a startup in technology.
Somebody who back in 1982 thought cell phones was a good idea when all of my fellow Harvard Law School classmates said, Warner, get a real job, nobody's going on a cell phone. They're practicing law, I got rich. So the conceptual idea, the notion, and I have huge respect for what Mr. Musk has accomplished, was a big advocate around SpaceX early on and breaking up the space lines, space oligarchy, and obviously Tesla. The kind of X not so much. The slash and burn. First, when you're talking about potentially destroying years of government, it's hard enough to be in government speak. Most people in government could do better outside. And my fear is that you come in and slash and burn, and the people that can leave will leave, and you may end up with a less qualified enterprise. There are areas. I've had somebody in recently on. There's lots of pieces around housing settlement, for example, how title insurance, others where there's you could bring efficiencies. Government operations. There's lots of places at the State Department. I think there is this effort. As long as then Congress has a role that we could potentially temper, but I'm anxious to see what they bring up.
Yes, a lot of people are. Anxiety, I think, is the governing emotion these days. Right. And it'll be interesting. Disruptors either can create incredible, breathtaking, positive change, or just disruption.
Yeah,
and I think we'll find out.
Yeah. And one thing I would add, and this is kind of a related, but not directly to the DOGE effort, is that I'm sure the Intelligence Committee soon will be vice chair. If I have one overarching goal in that job is to kind of redefine national security away from simply who has the most tanks, guns, ships, and planes. It really is a technology competition, particularly vis-a-vis China. And it is the battle around AI and quantum, next generation wireless, bio. If many Americans never heard of Huawei 6 years ago, the company that you will soon be on everybody's lips is BGI, Beijing Genomics Institute, what China's doing in terms of scooping up DNA. So the idea of bringing technology to government and recognizing our competition on a global basis in technology, that's a good thing. Coming in and blowing up institutions figuratively for the sake of blowing them up, not so much.
So let's talk about the tax bill coming up. It is reconciliation on a tax bill is a both complicated and free-flowing process that takes place during the day and in the middle of the night. Opportunity Zones 2.0 is going to be one of the things that may come up in that. There are others, obviously LIHTC. How are you thinking about a tax bill and how Democrats in particular are going to engage in that process?
Well, the challenge is, will there be any engagement at all? And both parties have been guilty of this. 2017 Republicans, some of the things the Democrats did when Biden came in. There is some conversation about Republicans maybe doing one reconciliation that's jamming tax cuts and another that's got policy that would not necessarily go through reconciliation, that would have more bipartisan. You mentioned opportunity zones. I am wide open on how we can improve on that. I mean, I came initially feeling like lots and lots of bad press about opportunity zones. Some of the advocates came back to me recently and said, no, there's actually good data. I'm still trying to get a better grip, and I would love to hear again from the community where it could be improved on a going forward basis. I'm not willing to just kind of flush it down, and since it's a Republican priority, I think we'll grapple with it. But again, there's an area I'd love to have input and more data.
So let's go back to the future, and then we'll talk about the future. You went to law school here in D.C.
I went to college here.
Went to college here.
I went to law school up at that little school in Boston.
Ah, yes. The Michigan of the East. Senator Abe Ribicoff, you worked in his office.
I opened mail.
Open mail. It's an important job.
Yep.
And
In
Senator
a green polyester leisure suit that was
absolutely
even not hip in 1973.
You were a fashion icon then. Chris Dodd,
Yep.
who you later worked with as a fellow senator. You ran Governor Doug Wilder's successful 1989 campaign in Virginia. We've got some Senate staffers here in the audience. What would you advise them thinking about a career in politics?
I think it is still a very normal profession. I think, when kids come up, I say, you may not like what we do in this building, but it's going to affect your life. And it's still a profession. I've done this now for, Lord knows, a long, long time, 25 years in elective office, but almost. And I look back at this and I feel, I've kind of done the right thing. I got to the point in the early 90s where I'd been lucky enough to do better than I could ever expected, and I'm first generation to go to college, came from a lower middle class family, had student debt. And I said, do I want to be on my deathbed and never actually have tried to run? So I said I tried to run. I would not necessarily advise to do what I did, which was to then jump in, never having run for anything, and run for the United States Senate against the most popular guy in Virginia. His name was John Warner. Warner versus Warner, we confused the hell out of everybody in Virginia. We did have one takeaway. We had a bumper strip that said, "Mark, not John."
I like that.
People in Southern Virginia and Danville said to me, saw my bumper strip, said, "Excuse me, is that a biblical reference?" No divine intervention. I got second place. But to the point, and just two quick comments. One is that, I learned so much from John Warner. He became a dear friend. He ended up supporting me later. I spoke at his funeral. So this idea that you can cross lines, we can't lose that. My only 2 cents worth of advice, and this I say with some hesitancy, the flexibility I had when I came back to politics of having had some business success and financial success under me was so important. But I hate to say that means the prerequisite means you got to go out and make money before you come in. But it did make it, the freedom to say to a group or a entity, keep your money, I don't need it, is I wish more of my colleagues had.
Yeah, that's for sure. So according to your Wikipedia profile, You once got your parents' White House tour tickets, and you know where this is going. And when they asked you why you didn't get one for yourself, you said that you would go to the White House when you lived there. A few years later, you have been to the White House many times, but you've never lived there. So the Democratic field is now wide open. The party is in the rebuilding stage.
I thought we were friends.
Could a move across the Potomac be in your future?
No. I mean, I kicked the
Well, that
tires.
was definitive.
No, yes, I kicked the tires on this. I had my 15 minutes when I was leaving governor and thought about running nationally and frankly got almost a little intimidated by it. I also had a kid that was sick, and so there were reasons. But I also think if anybody is not intimidated by that notion, but I'm at the stage in my life, as a both senior senator and senior citizen, where I'd like to do this one more time. I think the value that I provide is hopefully recognizing that less of our issues are left, right, and more future past. I have some familiarity with technology. I'm proud of the fact that there has not been a bipartisan gang since I've been in the Senate that I'm not proud of. Matter of fact, I got bipartisan tats up and down my sleeves. And I think, getting in and forming those coalitions and in housing and affordable housing is an area where I think we can put some real points on the board. And I've been blessed to have a great career. I got a great family. Probably the single best thing I have about this job that it took me years to appreciate, of the 535 members of Congress, 100 senators, 435 House members, my actual home in Alexandria, I can see the Capitol from the third floor of my house in Alexandria. So that fact that I only have to have a 20-minute commute on non-rush hours is a real blessing and gives me a lot more time to get into these issues. So I feel I'm at the right place in my life to try to do the right things and support folks coming up that are reasonable on either side.
Well, and as I often tell people, and certainly advice I follow myself, never quit your dream job. So thank you for joining us. Really appreciate it. Appreciate all the work you do for housing, the country and the world, and looking forward to working with you.
Thank you, David. Thank you. Harass Nick. Thank you all.
Nick number 2 in the back.
Thank you.